Good morning. It is 10:58 a.m. on Sunday, March 12th, 2017. I'm Christiana Ellis and I keep getting distracted. This is 5 more minutes. So, today is Sunday. That means it's time to resume our normal schedule for Avatar: The Last Airbender rewatch. Yay! And so, um, just before we begin, a brief illness update. I'm continue to be slowly on the mend, like feeling a little better every day, but still not great. It's a little annoying to not just be better already. Although there is that line, right? When you're sick and you start saying, okay, well, I can forgive myself for not getting certain things done because I'm sick and my job is to get better. But at what point in the recovery process do you start expecting things of yourself again? My answer is today, but maybe not that much. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see. In any case, today's episode is season 2, episode 9, Bitter Work. And we have two of our characters undergoing training, and both of them having a hard time with it. We have Aang attempting his, first earthbending lessons in earnest from Toph. Now definitely part of the group, and thankfully after last episode, there's a little less acrimony in camp. The kids have had a bit of catharsis there after dealing with Azula coming together in order to chase her away. And I like that there's a little bit of, it's not just everything is peachy keen. There's still some lingering passive aggressive tension between Toph and Katara, which is nice. Katara is being nice and helpful and not trying to ask anything else, but she also is pretty sure she knows best how Aang should be taught. Like what does he respond to as a student? And it's interesting too, just because so much of this episode is focused on the mindset represented by each element, and the idea that Katara, as a waterbender, is definitely recommending a much more, I guess, water-like approach, which is to kind of roll with what's happening, reinforce when it's good, and maybe take a break when it's bad, that sort of thing, as opposed to Toph's steadfast, stubborn, earthbending approach, which is, no, there's a right way to do it, so do it right now. And that's interesting. And then, of course, we also have on our other end of the episode, we have Zuko learning some new techniques from Iroh. Thankfully, at least partially recovered. Still wounded, but not, dying, thankfully, after being injured by Azula. And let's talk a little bit about the conversation between Zuko and Iroh that begins that storyline for this episode, because one, it's nice to see Zuko taking care of Iroh, even if his tea making skills are apparently subpar. But it's nice to see that side of Zuko, because he so rarely lets himself show it. I mean, we know it's there. We've seen those impulses, like in the Zuko Alone episode, for example. But most of the time, he refuses to let himself show any nurturing side of himself or caring. But it's interesting that maybe our first instinct is like Zuko's, in the sense of, well, Azula's his sister, shouldn't we try to understand, or something like that? But to have Iroh kind of unambiguously say, no, she's crazy and needs to go down. And that's certainly our expectation too, just in the sense of, unlike when Zuko was sort of our primary antagonist, he, even in season one, was sort of had a foil in Admiral Zhao, in the sense that even though Zuko is ostensibly the bad guy in the sense that he's the one trying to chase and catch Aang, we could see the complexity there already, the conflict, the fact that it's personal only in the quest, not the goal, meaning he has reasons to be on this quest, but the fact that the quest is to catch the Avatar is almost incidental. Like, he doesn't care about the Avatar except that he believes that the Avatar will help him get his honor back. But now with Azula, like, not only is everything personal, but she makes it more and more personal on purpose. Like, that's part of her thing. Not only is she super skilled as a firebender, but she works by getting in your head. And she will use any connection between you against you. And in that sense, Iroh, whose wisdom we've come to trust over the course of the series, for him to be pretty blunt about it, to say, no, there's no dealing with her, there's no working with her. She has to be defeated, and that's the end of it. And our instincts say, yeah, that's probably right, but it is still nonetheless a little bit surprising to hear Iroh say it, because usually he is all about, seeing things from the other side, that sort of thing. But so, in trying to train Zuko is insistent, I need to learn some more advanced firebending techniques if I'm going to have any hope of standing toe-to-toe with her, much less beating her. Especially given that she has this lightning channeling thing. And so it's a nice callback, and we get a little reminder of it in the previously from previously on segment. Excuse me. That once in the past, when Zuko and Iroh were up against Azula, Iroh did this cool thing where he channeled her lightning through him and sent it away safely. And so that is, we start with Iroh talking about what it means to lightning bend, essentially. What does it take to do it? And apparently what it takes is basically total dispassion. Like, you have to be able to take your emotion completely out of it. And that's a little bit chilling, because we see Azula do it all the time, and it's almost like, she's kind of a monster in that respect, is that it's easy for her to completely divorce herself from normal human emotions. And so Zuko is not like that. Zuko he is, like, everything he is wrapped up in his emotions, his feelings of pride and rage and despair and loneliness, and shame. And in particular, pride and shame is what Iroh hones in on and says, the reason you're having so much trouble trying to bend lightning, the reason it keeps exploding on you, is because of this inner turmoil that you have. Your feeling of shame, and Zuko talks about feeling pride, and the idea. So the lesson Iroh is trying to teach him here is to stop essentially, like, blaming himself and thinking he has nothing to offer just because he's been rejected by the people he thought he wanted to impress. And unfortunately, Zuko is just not in a place where he can hear that right now. He keeps trying to have this emotional journey work in half steps or by just reassigning his target. So now instead of capturing the Avatar, who cares about the Avatar? Now he needs to defeat Azula to get his honor back. And he is just determined that getting his honor back is the only thing that will satisfy, even though Iroh's kind of trying to tell him that, like, maybe that's kind of the problem, is you don't, that's not what you need. And it's hard. And in particular, Iroh tries to instill in him this idea of, you know, you can gain wisdom by listening to other sources. It's not all firebending all the time. Look at this technique you can get if you study waterbending, for example. And he talks about a little bit about the different mindsets of the different elements, which of course dovetails with the conversation being had over with Aang and Toph and Katara and so on, which we'll return to in a moment. But Zuko, like, first of all, recognizes, hey, you're talking about those 4 different elements all in harmony? Isn't that Avatar stuff? And Iroh, we can imagine Iroh going, yeah, but knowing, okay, but that's what makes the Avatar powerful, is that he can tap into all 4 elements. So if you are able to glean wisdom from more than one element, that will also make you more powerful, which, is what Zuko wants to hear. But unfortunately, Zuko is still too caught up to really hear the lesson. And so what he's hearing is, I'm teaching you a technique that will help you beat Azula and make you more powerful. And that's the end goal here. And so Iroh teaches Zuko this technique to redirect the lightning, but emphasizes when he does so how dangerous it still is. And it's really kind of an interesting, neat detail, like the idea that, you have to bring it in through your arm and bring it down to your stomach where your power comes from, but don't let it go through your heart, and then back out. And it's just neat, the world building of their techniques here. But then when he doesn't want to test Zuko on it, it's like, I'm not going to shoot lightning at you just so you can practice this move I taught you. It's dangerous. If you don't do it right on your first try, you could die. That's not a training move. Or is it? Because we talk about that later with Aang's and earthbending. But that's, of course, not what Zuko wants to hear, because what he needs is concrete forward motion towards his goal of defeating Azula and getting his honor back, and he's just not open to listening to anything else. And so, he runs away again and tries to seek out lightning to shoot down at himself, and he ends up doing the whole yelling at the storm thing. Like, is that all you've got? You've been, throwing crap at me all this time, and can't shoot lightning at me now. And poor Zuko, he's in a rough place, man. And it's heartbreaking. I think we're meant to be with Iroh in this section of the story, just in the sense of seeing how much Zuko has to offer if he can let go of this idea, this former idea of himself. It's hard, but it's so great. Great storytelling, great characterization. So in the meantime, that's where we leave Iroh and Zuko for this episode. But let's jump back over to Aang and Katara and Toph, and we talk about the difference in mindsets between the different elements, and how Aang's sort of natural element is air, which is very agile and nimble and able to redirect things, but that can translate to his own just personality and approach, which is to avoid hard stuff and to dance around things when they're uncomfortable and that sort of thing. And Toph is trying to just say, that's not what earthbending is. Earthbending is stubborn, and you just have to meet it head on. And Aang has a lot of difficulty doing that. It's very foreign to him. He is not used to it because air, like water, flows around things. And so he is kind of more able to go there. And then we also remember his limited experience trying to learn firebending, which we haven't, revisited that idea in a while. That taps into another thing that's a little foreign to him, or rather that he tries to avoid, like an airbender, that his own feelings of anger or pain about what he has gone through and what he needs to do. But earthbending, it's like, nope, there's no dancing around it. There's no little trick to figuring it out. Just have to do it. And we see him starting to make some progress. Eventually, he starts getting the stance right. We see him doing various drills where he's, strengthening and everything. But then it comes down to Toph has, first of all, we see her just immediately and completely reject Katara's suggestion for how to teach, which is kind of fun. The continuation of the Twinkle Toes nickname, for example, is fun. But we see that she sets up this thing where a giant boulder is going to run straight at Aang. And the whole test of it is to say, you're going to stand right there, you're going to let it come at you, and then you're going to stop it. You're not going to jump out of the way. You're not going to dodge. You're not going to avoid it. It's coming at you. You need to face it down. And Aang can't make himself do it. And it's a real block for him. And she makes it very clear, if you can't get past that block, you're not going to get anywhere with earthbending, because that's what you have to be able to do. And she's very stubborn about it. And then, meanwhile, we also have the weird kind of side subplot of Sokka in the hole, where in attempting to hunt a baby moose mountain lion cub, or moose saber-tooth mountain lion cub, I think that's what they said. Was it moose saber-tooth tiger? I love the animal hybrids in the show. Anyway, and getting stuck in this crack in the rock. And my only quibble with the episode has always been just that it seems a little bit weird for the crack in the rock to work kind of just like that. But I suppose, we could make allowances for it in ways that the show doesn't really offer, namely, oh, well, the ground is unstable because of all the earthbending they're doing around. But that doesn't seem really likely, just given that in the past, where we've seen places with a lot of earthbending happening, it didn't seem to destabilize the ground elsewhere. There's also the possibility, not really addressed, and I don't think intended, that Toph did it on purpose to put Aang in that situation. Because, of course, later when Aang shows up and we have that whole bit, which we'll talk about in a moment, Toph's right there, so the idea is, was this a setup? But I don't think so. I don't think that Toph would, while she would certainly take advantage of a situation like that, and does, I don't think she would really put Sokka in harm's way on purpose that way. Excuse me. But in the meantime, it's fun to have a bit from Sokka where he recognizes, first of all, he's waxing philosophic about the need to hunt this little baby creature in the first place. So that's kind of fun. But then talking to himself as he's stuck in the hole, this idea of oh, karma, help me, I will become a vegetarian. And then as he gets increasingly desperate, it's I will give up meat, and sarcasm. And I always kind of just thought of myself as that's who I was. I was the meat and sarcasm guy, but I could be the vegetarian and straight talking guy. So he has kind of a rough go of it, just all by himself in the hole there. But thankfully, the first of all, that the mom doesn't come along before Aang shows up, so that would have been problematic. But eventually, Aang is having this trouble standing his ground for earthbending, and then eventually, when Sokka has not returned from his hunt, they get concerned, so they're looking for him. Aang finds him, but says, "Oh, well, airbending is not going to be able to get him out of this hole, so what can we do?" And he kind of unloads his emotional baggage onto Sokka, who is kind of he's a captive audience for the moment. And but then, of course, the mom shows up, this giant moose with giant saber-toothed tiger fangs, and it's really dangerous. And we can see a couple of times Aang tries to use his airbending to redirect this enormous creature, and it works for a second, but then it just turns around and comes back again. He's not getting it to go away. It is stubborn enough that it's going to take more to make it leave. And eventually, and so we see at one point Aang trying to dance away to draw it away, but it leaves Sokka vulnerable, and Sokka actually says, "Please don't dance away from me like that again." And Aang just realizes, yeah, okay, my friend is in danger here and can't move out of the way, and if I move out of the way, it leaves him at risk. And so Aang finally finds the grit to stand his ground in defense of his friend. Not for himself, because for himself it's always too easy to deflect or dance away. But in defense of Sokka, he's able to do it. He stands his ground. And eventually, so the day is saved. Turns out Toph was right there, and she's we have a fun bit where now that it's like, okay, well, first of all, we have Aang, now that he's got his blood up and he's just stood his ground, now he's pissed at Toph, first of all, for not helping when Sokka was really in danger, but also for continuing to use his staff to crack nuts and that sort of thing, which, of course, she was doing just to make him mad, to try to provoke this response. But finally, he stands up to her, too, and she says, "All right, now Earthbend, right now." And he does. But then we get the fun bit of like, yeah, but maybe you should still let me help Sokka get out, because you could crush him. But so it's nice to have Aang make that breakthrough. And in this case, it was not just from listening to his friends, but from having someone other than himself to care about. And that's, again, it's like last time, it's where Zuko is struggling because he does care about Iroh, and that's where this positive influence comes from, but he keeps trying to reject that part of himself because it's too painful. Whereas Aang continues to make progress and new gains in his abilities by virtue of having friends to help him along. The only other thing I think I wanted to mention was just there's a nice bit where Aang was calling Toph Sifu Toph as a master, a bending master term of respect. And at one point, Katara kind of is like, "You never call me Sifu Katara." And it's like, we can understand why that wouldn't have been. He kind of knew her as Katara before knowing her as a waterbending master. But it's nice also that after working with her a little bit, gaining some wisdom from her too, that she is also right in pointing out to him that his desire to avoid things is part of the problem. And it's nice though that he eventually gives her, Sifu Katara. That's nice too. So some great stuff in this episode, and we continue the this Aang's journey. He has taken a huge step towards his ultimate goal of mastering all four elements so that he can stop the comet. And in the meantime, Zuko seems to be one step forward, two step backing it all the way into oblivion if he can't find some way to change course. And all the while, Azula, this crazy monster, Azula is ascendant and pursuing them at every turn. So, we'll be back next time and talk more about Avatar: Last Airbender next week. So, talk to you guys tomorrow for 5 more minutes.